I am Lorenzo Del Pace and I work with FRESCI. FRESCI is a company devoted to shortening the gap between science and society by fostering the translation of research into innovation through strategic business planning, data analysis, and stakeholder engagement. These that I am presenting are slides on a survey on experimental models in biomedical research that FRESCI has run in 2021, gathering responses from European researchers. Our aim was to understand how experimental models are chosen, evolved, passed along, and the drivers and barriers that affect the change. We deem the experimental model an essential trait of research and one that defines the scientific activity of the individual researcher, hence our analysis. As you see, models are at the heart of research. They can be career defining, but they can also represent a possible bottleneck because not every research is possible with every single model. But mostly, we have to consider that they embody a paradigm and they go as far as to represent an ontology of what reality and the possibilities of investigating it are. Also, it's impossible to forget that models are learned and then they are used and then they are passed along to subsequent generations. Now, we also have to consider another aspect, the fact that even models, in a way, have to answer to society. As such, models are a very delicate subject to investigate. First of all, I would like to begin from what is a common but naive conviction. That is, that a simple direct link exists between research and innovation. That is, that having research is a sufficient condition for innovation. Unfortunately, that is not the case. The path between research and innovation is certainly non-linear and indeed can be very tortuous, having also to cross the very dreaded valley of death before it becomes innovation. The translatability of research into innovation has gained significant attention even at the highest levels of the European Union. President von der Leyen herself commented on this. Recognizing the scientific might of Europe, she acknowledged that efforts are still needed to translate its scientific exploits into innovation. Along those lines, the JRC has produced a recent survey in which they explored the link between EU research investments and the effective societal impact produced. They specifically targeted the fields of Alzheimer's disease and other dementias, breast and prostate countries, but the idea is very clear and very necessary, emerging the real ratio at which science produces positive outcomes for society. So, clearly, the enticingly intuitive linear equation that research equals innovations needs to be revised. It needs to be compounded with other dimensions that exert a significant influence on the whole process and eventually play a key role in deciding whether research turns into innovation or not. Those extra dimensions include, for instance, results and the possibility of their translatability, of course, but also geography, that is, the conducivity of the surrounding environment to translation into innovation, time, because it represents cost and opportunity, but there is more. And something that is often underestimated, that is stakeholders, which are not simply industry investors, regulators, or media, but they include society, and with it, society's approval. Because no matter how good innovation is, if society stonewalls it because it deems the work or the method used inappropriate or simply unacceptable, results will not translate into innovation and will wither and die. So, I would say no linear equation connecting research to innovation, but rather a frightening many bodies problem. For a survey, we decided to concentrate on three of these players: researchers, society, and regulators, because they form an active triangle with bidirectional relations, a constrained structure that eventually defines the research environment itself. So to recap, we know that the process is not this, but even simplifying it quite a bit, it is more similar to this. As we see, researchers leverage and rely on models. Their work needs to comply with regulators, and the results may eventually reach society, which evaluates them according to its own current sensitivities. Only if no hiccup happens during the entire process, research will then have a societal impact. Models are a key element in this simplified equation, and models we decided to investigate. Now, the structure of a survey. We created 22 questions. 17 of them are single questions. 5 of them are what we labeled as container questions. They are sets of questions on a single topic that try to evaluate the respondent's attitude to it from a variety of angles and perspectives. We also divided it into 8 thematic areas. But as we said at the beginning, models are essential to researchers. In a way, a researcher uses a model, but a model defines a researcher, as it offers him a paradigm and an ontology. Questioning models or questioning about models requires as neutral as possible an approach to avoid any sort of defensive answers. We didn't want to elicit any partisanship. Biomedical research is already ripe with significant societal discussion and increasing polarization. Hence, our decision to approach every single question following this strategy. Our questions have been finessed. They were never blunt. And as much as possible, we preferred an indirect approach. We also went for ethically unloaded questions. Possible choices have been formulated in the most acceptable way. Also, we never gave implicit judgments. Answers are devoid of negative traits. Better yet, all answers are formulated under a positive spin to increase the degree of relatability. To make it short, we aimed for the maximum inclusivity. We did not want and do not need political answers brought about by blunt questioning. We wished for respondents to feel empowered to candidly share their views. Eventually, we secured 117 respondents. And we aimed for a higher seniority in our respondents because we were also interested in how models are taught and passed along. We succeeded in this because 80% of our respondents falls within the R2 or 4 EU seniority classifications and with over 1/3 in the highest seniority. We also had significant numbers from few countries and lesser results from others, but we still covered the majority of EU countries. As to our respondents, they are active in a variety of branches, which include, most notably, neuroscience, oncology, toxicology, regenerative medicine, and so forth. As to the analysis we performed, at first we divided users by model used. We chose 4 macro categories: animal model users, human model users, users of both animal and human models, and a fourth category in which we conflated all the other methods. Now, this is an example of the data collected, and I wanted to share with you also an example of what we labeled the container questions. Following the conception that science does not happen in a vacuum and that stakeholders' relations are essential, we meant to investigate how the respondents evaluated the participation to the scientific and political debate on science of a variety of actors. Now, as we see, it is immediately clear that some actors are reputed useful by the largest majority of respondents, for instance, research foundations and animal research NGOs. On the other hand, other actors catalyze preoccupation for large numbers of the surveyed, for instance, animal rights NGOs, political parties, policymakers. Those are very interesting numbers, especially once we pair them with the kind of model used by the researcher. This question allows us to reconstruct the wider perspective of societal participation for the single surveyed with a single question. And that is what I was meaning before with the entire idea of container questions. Now, at the very beginning, we expressed our conviction of the key role played by experimental models in translating science to innovation. That process is very, very complex. One of the things that it stumbles upon is the fact that scientific results need publication. So we wondered, is there a specific kind of model that might ensure or foster higher chances of publication or business exploitation? What is the impression and the experience of the surveyed? Thus, we asked them whether animal experiments ought to complement in vitro or in silico human-based experiment models to increase chances of publication in high-impact journals or business exploitations. The answers were again very interesting, as you see. And more interesting even than the first line of answers was the second, in which many declared that they have direct experience of the need of such kind of experiments. Again, this is a proof that the choice of model has deeper ramifications than the mere scientific experiment in which it is used. Now, I wanted to jump abruptly to another part of the survey, just to give you an idea of how much we try to include into it. So, as we say, and we all know, science is not static. And so, models and the choice of model is neither. The question was then, does further education and training play a role in the choice of model or the use or the teaching of it? Lots of inferences could be gathered by analyzing the data of workshop courses attended, especially when we confront them with the seniority, used model, for instance, and other data that we gathered. Just to give a simple glimpse, 57 of our respondents use either animal-based models or both human and animal based models, and 30% took at least a course or attended a workshop on animal welfare. Or, for something as key as in experimental design, 23% of all the surveyed took courses on improving experimental design. We believe these to be very interesting numbers. Now, I wanted to also give you a glimpse of our investigation into the perception of the regulations. And we did this through a question on the Directive 2010-63, which is the cornerstone of European biomedical research. The directive is a declaration of intent of significant ethical and scientific import. It embodies the 3Rs principles, and it states that alternative methods are to be used whenever available, that refinements need be applied and replacement needs to take place. But it also acknowledges the importance of animal research, although it frames it in current necessity, acknowledging that its importance, but at specific conditions. So we wondered, how clearly is that understood by researchers? How clear do they have the framework in which they operate? And what their answer to an admittedly convoluted question might tell us of their deeper scientific beliefs, not just in terms of scientific activity, but also of how science ought to be allowed to operate. So this is, well, let me say that this is a fine example of our questioning strategy. Especially because the way it is formulated and the proposed answers are formulated. And if you can read the answers, none of them has a negative spin. Just to leave you with a number, the first you can see, 30% of the respondents think the directive is not fully objective. And among them, even human model users answer that. Well, this is enough. I've taken already too much of your time. Just wanted to tell you that a full report will be soon made available. It will include many more evaluations on the data we gather, and will be freely available to every stakeholder that is interested in participating and informing the societal debate on biomedical research. If you have any question or if you would like to get in touch with us, please use these links. We would be at your disposal. It's been a pleasure for me to present this work, and I thank you very much for your time.